Hello.
Hello. Hey, what's going on, everyone? I guess we said.
It's a fireside chat, so therefore we're allowed to sit.
And just a quick note that the open bar is open now, not after. So.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So feel free to jump in quietly, and so we're going to try to get through some Q&A for about 20 minutes. Then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience for a couple minutes, as long as there's interest. So I think most
Especially
of y'all,
from people who've been at the open bar, they get to be first in line for questions.
yes, exactly. They will have the best questions. So yeah, just to get us started, I think your reputation may precede you in this room, but Zooko is a real-life cypherpunk. He is probably best known as the creator of Zcash. Some people may be surprised to hear that you also created Zooko's Triangle.
Oh yeah, Zooko's Triangle is like just an idea.
And
in fact, I don't even think I invented Zooko's Triangle. I think other people thought of it, and then they credit it to me because it was in conversation with them at the time. You know how that happens?
I do. Actually, I don't, but that's great. So I'll skip the rest of the intro. Obviously, you're founder advisor to Least Authority, who does our audits. They're our favorite auditor.
Least Authority is really good security audits.
Yes.
Did you see what happened recently where this wallet called Atomic Wallet hired Least Authority to do a security audit? And it came out, so Least Authority is this company that I'm a founder of, and they do a whole lot of security audits for crypto projects. And Atomic Wallet is a wallet that is out there and supports a lot of coins and tokens. And they hired Least Authority to do security audit, but Least Authority's contracts always say that they reserve the right to publicly disclose stuff to protect users, even against the objections of their customer. So they just now announced that they found critical, dangerous flaws in Atomic Wallet which could threaten the user's money, and they advise everyone to stop using Atomic Wallet, even though Atomic Wallet disagrees. So just be aware, that's happening.
That hopefully will not happen with Tally.
Right. Oh, so Tally's hiring Least Authority for the security audits?
Yeah, they did our key ring, and they're doing some contracts right now.
Excellent.
So.
Those guys are really good at that.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump in right off the bat. We got to ask you about privacy.
Privacy, it's important.
It's important. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this moment in privacy and maybe like information warfare in general, as we are possibly heading into another war this year.
Well, that's a great framing question. Information warfare in general, it does seem to be heating up over the last 5 years, right? Like the internet is an increasingly hostile place. And my view is that 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years ago, there was this narrative like people don't care about privacy. And at the time I kind of believed it. I was like, oh, darn, people don't care about privacy. They're so wrong. And later I thought, wait a minute, those were all stories planted by Google and Facebook to make me think people don't care about privacy. And that's not actually true. People really do care about privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stakes for privacy are also different now. Like back, I don't know, even going back to the 70s and before, I feel like privacy was a conversation around okay, how can we avoid 1984-style digital dystopia surveillance nightmare? It's that, and now super added to it, we have, if you're not protecting your data, you're going to be subject to pretty much nonstop behavioral modification from the private sector and also nation states.
1984 was totally prophetic, and everybody should read that book. But you're right, he missed the ubiquitous behavior modification where your devices and everything you interact with on the internet is subtly nudging you to make them more money all the time, or to get your to provoke you or influence you in some way for their political purposes. It's either money or political power or both.
Yeah, and I think probably weird things are happening now that we won't know about for 5 or 10 years.
If ever, yeah.
Yes.
I do hope that history survives and there are history books that are accurate someday. Sorry to be negative. It's a scary time for me, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's jump into, probably the most celebrated resistance to surveillance capitalism is the cypherpunks. And so a lot of people maybe don't know this, but the cryptocurrency phenomenon has been going on over 30 years now. I think the first cryptocurrency on record was DigiCash, made by David Chaum in 1989. And if my memory serves me right, you moved to Amsterdam in the 90s to work with David.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? And compared to where you thought we'd be in the 90s, how does all this today compare? Is it bigger? Is it smaller? Is it just different?
So in the 90s, the internet was new, and like the World Wide Web was new. There weren't very many web pages, and I remember there was a web page that would give you a link to a new web page every day. You're like, wow, there's another web page every day. I'm going to look at that. And the cypherpunks correctly predicted or envisioned a lot of things, including cryptography, search engines, the spread of the web, and that there would be like billions of users soon. And you asked what it was like to go to work on DigiCash. So DigiCash was the first cryptocurrency in a sense, because it was like an online internet native thing, and it had privacy so that the operator of the service couldn't monitor everyone's behavior. But it didn't have decentralization. DigiCash relied on a central server. And so that's why I think it failed. And you said cypherpunks are famous or whatever for resistance.
They're very celebrated, yeah.
Celebrated, and there's two reasons for that. The big one is Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin was the first real important success in my view. The smaller one, which was kind of a false victory, was against the United States government trying to outlaw cryptography in the early days of the internet, which also the cypherpunks were really active in. And the outcome of that, in my view, was just people started using the internet to like buy books online, and so then all of a sudden Congress was like, oh wait, maybe we'll stop trying to ban encryption for national security purposes when it turns out encryption is good for economic purposes.
Yeah, you basically couldn't have a functional economy on the internet with no encryption.
Oh yeah, that's a really weird alternate history. You know, before the cypherpunks, it was the cryptographers. David Chaum was one of them, Ron Rivest, Adi Shamir, Ralph Merkle, Whit Diffie. These are all cryptographers who were like young scientists, mathematicians who, you know, scribble on a chalkboard every day for their living. And then they happened upon these breakthroughs in cryptography. The important one was called public key cryptography. And there's this little told story where the United States military attempted to classify that, right? They had come up. And this is like absolutely not a conspiracy theory. We know because it had happened before. About 10 years earlier, some British mathematicians had discovered public key cryptography, and the British Secret Service successfully nationalized that and kept it secret and didn't do anything with it, right? Like nothing happened. And if the American military had succeeded at the same thing, then we just wouldn't have the internet, right? Like the internet would have lasted until attackers started attacking it, and then it would have fallen apart. It would have just become like a centralized broadcast medium like broadcast TV or whatever. So it was these cryptographers who were basically before the cypherpunks, we're talking 1970s, who performed really courageous civil disobedience and defied threats and pressure from the National Security Agency to make public key cryptography be part of the open legacy of humanity instead of a military secret.
Or a Clipper chip.
Yeah, the Clipper chip. The Clipper chip was a proposal to require any device that could connect to the internet, and you can see this is like 1970s thinking. It's like, oh, phones are allowed to connect to the phone network, so we have a whole long book full of rules about what phones are allowed to have. Well, any device that can connect to the internet is going to have this thing called a Clipper chip in it, which gives the FBI access to everything that device does. That was a serious proposal, and it was a cypherpunk named Matt Blaze who helped kill it by hacking it. He found a flaw in the Clipper chip, and he published this result that said, you know, if you go ahead and require this, here's a hack that any person in the world can do to disable this thing. And that was one of the reasons why Congress gave up on that whole shambles and switched to like an open economy.
Yeah, no, I encourage anyone who's not familiar with this to check it out. There's actually a book called Crypto by Stephen Levy that goes through all of this. It's awesome. I think it's like, we might make it required reading on my team. But okay, I want to jump back in. So when Zcash launched in October 2016, I believe is the right month.
Yeah.
Y'all launched with, at the time, was like a pretty novel mechanism for funding open source development and just general development of the protocol. Famously, you've gotten a lot of flack, you got a lot of shit from Bitcoiners for this, but this has aged really well because what you created then is actually not very dissimilar to what we're seeing with DAO grants or things like Gitcoin, Aqueduct.
In the ensuing 5 or 6 years, it turned out that projects, the token holders of projects funding improvements and maintenance and support themselves is superior to depending on like some whale or mega corporation or someone, or just volunteer labor.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything that makes you like especially excited or skeptical about the way that just like FOSS funding in crypto works generally?
There's so much going on, I don't even know a tenth of what's happening. So that's exciting. There's probably a lot of super great ideas. Like every few months, I look at the latest thing that Gitcoin is doing, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty awesome. I wish I had time to understand that. So like, I like experimentation, right?
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot more of that too. Yes, I encourage everyone to check out some of the stuff Gitcoin is doing. It is awesome. Okay, this maybe feeds into my next question. Zcash and Ethereum, very different technical visions, very different technical roadmaps, a lot of overlap with people, a lot of shared values, a lot of mutual respect. Vitalik is an advisor to Electric Coin Company.
Yeah.
A lot of Ethereum people are at ZCon.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about like what are some ways in which you'd like to see the two communities work together more. We were talking a bit about Halo. It'd be cool to maybe kick off with a story about Halo and hear more about that.
Okay, Halo is, in short, it's a new zero-knowledge proof system. But let me go back and tell the history. Zero-knowledge proofs were invented by a bunch more chalkboard scribbling mathematicians in the 1980s, and then they didn't get used for anything and for decades. And this is the same pattern that happened with public key cryptography and with lots of breakthroughs, is that it could take 20, 30 years before a scientific idea reaches real usage. And in the case of zero-knowledge proofs, which were invented in the 80s, it was Zcash in 2016 that made it a real live thing that people could rely on. And that first version of Zcash, it was the first. I'm really proud of it because it was like the demonstration that zero-knowledge proofs are a real live thing that actually protect people's privacy in practice, and lots of money can reside on it, like trust in it, and it doesn't get hacked. But on the other hand, that first version of the math was really sucky. You had to have a laptop. It had to have 4 gigs of RAM. It would like heat up your CPU for like 10 minutes or something to make a single transaction. That was a huge leap forward in the technology in 2016. And there's another deep flaw with that math, even in addition to all of its like performance problems, is that you had to have what's called a trusted setup, which we designed it in Zcash because Zcash is like privacy first. So we designed the architecture so that the privacy of the users is 100% protected by just cryptography, no matter what. But the monetary soundness of whether there's actually exactly 21 million Zcash depends on this trusted setup. And trusted setup means somebody has to create a big cryptographic number, and then they swear that they deleted the other half, right? They didn't keep a copy. And if someone did keep a copy, they could then counterfeit Zcash. So this was a huge, huge challenge when we were setting out to do this. And what we did is literally the most secure cryptographic ceremony ever performed, at least until that date, where we got 6 different participants who didn't know who each other were because there was like all this maximum OPSEC. We tried to do maximum OPSEC in advance, operational security in advance, to prevent any hackers from finding out what we're up to, and then have maximum transparency immediately after the fact. So we released videos and signed messages and all this stuff describing everything that had happened, except for one thing, which I'll get to. And the way it was constructed, if any one of those 6 participants honestly deleted their secret, then nobody, including the other 5, would be able to recover that counterfeiting key. So that was like the best thing that had ever been done, I think, and it still wasn't good enough, right? Like, people are not. There are plenty of people who are the kind of like paranoid, like self-sovereign people that I like, who are unwilling to assume that at least one of these 6 people successfully deleted their private key, as opposed to that all 6 of them got together in a conspiracy to counterfeit money.
Yeah, I saw David Vorick at MIT Bitcoin Expo 2019. He had a busted setup.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticisms, and I really appreciate, like, you know, well-intentioned, honest, like, criticism and scrutiny. And what happened was, so we invented a subsequent generation of technology, which is what you can use today. Oh, which reminds me, I forgot to say, every time I talk to anyone about Zcash, I tell them to install Zec Wallet on their phone. So if you install Zec Wallet on your phone, Z-E-C Wallet, Z-E-C wallet. It'll only take like 1 minute, and if you hit me up after, I'll send you like 1,000th of a Zcash just to show you how it works. Because it's like the experience of using it is way more impactful than like the story or the lecture. Okay, so where was I?
Oh, okay.
So generation 2.
Yeah,
Generation 1
Halo, yeah.
Generation 1 was just zero knowledge proofs, actually work in practice, but not very conveniently. And we had this trusted setup problem. Generation 2 is what you can install on Zec Wallet on your phone right now. And it only takes like 5 seconds to generate transactions on your phone, which is another breakthrough on the part of my team, and I'm super proud of it. Now, and I told you there was one fact that wasn't yet revealed from the original setup ceremony. There were 6 participants. And immediately after the ceremony, we revealed, and they were all like pseudonymous and stuff, and nobody knew who they were, where they lived around the globe, and all this stuff. And immediately after the ceremony, we publicly disclosed the identities of 5 of them. And nobody has ever known, other than me, who the 6th participant was from the original ceremony. But now Generation 3 is coming. Generation 3 is called Halo, and the important thing about it, there's 2 important things about it, but one is that there's no trusted setup aspect. Just Halo is just secure based on the math, and there's no people who have any secrets that have anything to do with anything. Make sense? So it's fully trustless. And the other thing about Halo is that it's a recursive zero-knowledge proof, which means you can prove any arbitrarily sized fact about any database, like the entire history of a blockchain or of all blockchains or a multi-petabyte database or anything. It's a general purpose zero-knowledge proof, so it's potentially going to be really useful for a lot of interesting things. So now that Halo is about to launch, which is happening in March on Zcash mainnet. And if you install Zec Wallet on your phone, then you'll have it. You'll be the first in line. Then that's the end of trust. That's like trusted setups become a thing of the past. And at that point, we're going to reveal the identity of the 6th participant from the original trusted setup back in 2016. So stay tuned.
I thought we were doing this Kool-Aid style on stage. Someone bust through the wall. It's Justin Sun.
No, it's way cooler.
It is. Cool. Okay. We got one more question, and then I think we're going to go into QA mode and drink mode. So you kind of warmed us up here, but wallets. So y'all got some wallet stuff going on. I'm working on a wallet. What is something that, what's a new feature that you just haven't seen anyone implement ever, or that they haven't done a good job with, or is there something that's just fundamentally kind of dumb about the wallet, how wallets work in generally as
that's a good question.
An interaction type?
I'm going to just kind of tangent and rant about wallets as such, because you asked what's a feature, and it's almost not about features. I have this simmering concept, which I mostly get from my brother, who's the CTO, Chief Research Officer at the Electric Coin Company. He's kind of like the architect of Zcash. And he points out that because of the way Bitcoin started and because of the way the cypherpunks were all about cryptography algorithms, including me, I've invented some cryptography algorithms that are pretty awesome, but it's total, user experience is the most important thing by far. And if you invent an algorithm or a protocol or something, and then you said, now we're going to build a user interface on top of that, the user experience is going to suck. That's the wrong order of operations, which is what I've always done, so I'm blaming myself here. But the right way to do things is start with the user experience first, right? What are users able to do that they weren't previously able to do, and what is it like for them when they try? And that means wallets. And so something I've learned that's really interesting for me as a cryptographer and a protocol designer is it turns out a lot of things, including privacy and cross-chain interoperation and a whole bunch of other things, are primarily provided by the wallet, not by the blockchain, which is the opposite of how we got into this when Bitcoin came along. It was originally just a blockchain, right? Same with Zcash. Anyway, so my point is wallets are the most important thing, and they're really the point of the spear of innovation because user experience is the most important thing, and the cryptography and the protocol needs to be designed to support that, not the other way around.
I totally agree, and I think that's really well said.
So I'm looking forward to the Tally wallet and to adding Zcash support.
Yes. I also had a question. So for devs who want to learn a little bit more about Halo, where should they go? What should they do?
I guess you would probably just like Google Zcash Halo and you'll find lots of information.
DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The Brave built-in search engine is pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Well, those are all my questions. I think we actually got through them pretty quickly, so we've got some QA time. But first, can we?
You have to drink a drink before I'll take your question. Just
Yeah.
kidding, just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, let's give this gentleman a round of applause and then go into QA.
Thanks.
And then should I, ETH Denver folks, should I pass the microphone, or are we doing kind of a people's mic situation?
You just call him somebody.
Okay. This gentleman.
Hi, thank you for the talk. How big of a threat do you think quantum computing is to cryptography?
I don't think it's a very big threat. I think there's a good chance quantum computers will never work, and the stories you hear about quantum computers being a huge deal are serving the interests of like quantum computer salesmen who sell future quantum computers for billions of dollars to their large national governments. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe they will eventually work. And by work, I mean, no, it's clear that they work at like the quantum computation level, but I don't think it's clear that they will ever scale up to where they could actually compute anything useful, especially cryptography, which is many times harder to compute than most other things. Does that make sense? So I could go on. I'm the author of a quantum safe digital signature algorithm, which is totally the best digital signature algorithm. A really interesting fact about quantum computers is even if you disagree with me and you think it could be a threat, there's two threats: breaking your privacy or forging your signature, right? And there's a really interesting fact. Breaking your privacy happens retroactively, right? If they have an archive of the blockchain from 50 years ago and they can break the encryption, they can now see what you did 50 years ago, right? But forging your signature only happens proactively, right? Once they invent some way to forge your signature 20 years from now, if by that time you upgrade to a quantum-resistant digital signature scheme, they can't do anything. Make sense? Anyway, there's totally good cryptography for that. And by the way, the Zcash blockchain is already better than more or less any other blockchain at being safe from future possible quantum computers retroactively violating your privacy.
Thank you. Yeah, whoever.
How's it going, guys? Since Zcash has the ability to have both P and T addresses, where do you see the future of Zcash when it comes to the retail marketplace of utilizing like your blockchain and technology?
So Zcash has two different kinds of addresses. There's two different kinds of addresses. Some are called T addresses for transparent, and some are called Z addresses for shielded. And you can make transactions between any combination, right? And whatever goes into or out of a T address is visible on the blockchain, so it has the transparency property like Bitcoin and Ethereum does. And whatever goes into or out of a Z address is invisible on the blockchain. And everybody who installs SecWallet is going to see this for themselves later. The question was, how do I see this impacting the future of retail participation?
Yeah, retail marketplace, selling of goods and services, since it's all, everyone wants more privacy with everything going on, transactional.
Yeah.
And you can choose.
Yeah. Overall, so Zcash is basically the leader in my view. Monero has a bigger market cap and probably a few more users, like 2x or something, depending. It's hard to tell. But Zcash is by far the best technologically, and it's the most widely recognized among the ones that are good enough technologically. And in my view, the fact that it has both transparent and shielded functionality is good because it gives those users options, and sometimes people want transparency. That's an interesting thing I've been seeing about DeFi and crypto and Web3 in general, is that sometimes people treat the transparency as a big part of the value add. Like, since we have this radical transparency, now we can do things in DeFi that we wouldn't have wanted to do if, in the bad old days when you had to trust some third party. Anyway, so I think it's good, in short.
Hi. I've heard a lot like about how Web3, one of the main differences from Web2 is just like digital ownership. I was wondering, like you have a wealth of knowledge on kind of the evolution of the internet, so I was wondering if you could give us some thoughts about how that changes like the structure of the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I'm going to refer to my friend Jay Graber, who's now the lead of Project Blue Sky, which is Twitter's attempt to spin out a new nonprofit whose job is to decentralize Twitter. So that's Jay. She's a former Zcash developer, and she recently posted an analysis of this, and she said, oh, I can't remember quite the cool word she used. It was like the first version, like Web 1, you had to run your own server and run your own website, which I did. It was pretty cool. But that meant you had control of it, right? So that was sort of part of what was magic about the World Wide Web was it had that end user ownership of their own stuff. And then Web 2 was all about end users creating stuff, which then a giant company controlled. And like you say, I think the promise of Web 3 is just returning to where the end users retain their own ownership of their own product or contributions. That's a simple model that is very motivating to me.
Yeah, it's easier to manage a key than to run a server. Yeah, it's easier. Well, yeah, maybe not. I was going to say, Zooko, maybe talk a little bit about the privacy sovereignty stuff. I think that's a good angle that maybe.
Yeah, there's a very simple thing which seems super obvious to me, and I don't know. I'd be interested to see if you agree or disagree. But like Bitcoin came out clearly as a part of the cypherpunk movement. Now I don't know who Satoshi was, or if they. Like, I think it's polite to use people's preferred pronouns and also their preferred names. So attempting to dox Satoshi really annoys me, and I never participate in it. But Satoshi, although I don't know anything about any more of their identity, they were clearly a part and parcel of the cypherpunk culture and community and the way they operated. Their goals were political, and their means were technological, and that's the cypherpunks in a nutshell. And Satoshi, Hal Finney, and literally 100% of the people involved in the early days. I don't know if you know, but I'm the author of the first blog post ever posted on the internet about Bitcoin, and the initial bitcoin.org homepage that Satoshi put up linked to my homepage back when we all had our own homepages. So I was like part of the community from the very beginning, and what really annoys me is revisionist history. I hate revisionist history. I'm like a obsessive accuracy maximalist. So what really pisses me off is when I hear people saying, oh, Bitcoin was always supposed to expose everyone's information to everyone else. That's the point. And I'm like, no, wait. I was there for the first 10 years straight. 100% of the people involved considered end user privacy to be half of the main value add. Independence from central banks, right? Independence from central banks, and independence from all the power structures and policemen that want to control everyone else. That was a unified value proposition. Satoshi and Hal Finney and others literally talked about if they could use zero knowledge proofs to fix Bitcoin's privacy problem. And the reason they couldn't is it was like 6 years too early for the scientific inventions that we later implemented. Can I keep ranting? I forget where I was going with that. Okay, one more thing. Listen, I got to tell you, you cannot have decentralization, censorship resistance, self-sovereignty. You cannot have ownership of your own stuff without privacy. All right? Like, if you're the Nazis and your job is to ban books, you don't have to intercept every truck coming in and inspect the trucks. All you have to do is say, our informants are watching you. If we find out you're reading a banned book, you're going to regret it. If you don't have privacy, then the most powerful, least moral agent in the room can control everyone else. That's it. So privacy is 100% necessary for everything that we as a community value.
First of all, thank you for the rants. That's why we're here. My question is both security and usability related for the end user using either Zcash or Zec Wallet. There's the saying, don't trust, verify, but when you're working with users, they don't do either. Does Zcash and Zec Wallet have any features to protect the users from themselves and perhaps accepting contracts that they may not understand or sharing keys that they may not want to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love it. There's something which is both a benefit and a drawback of Zcash, is that like Bitcoin, it's relatively limited and dumb, and that means there's fewer ways to get confused and shoot yourself in the foot, right? So there's no general purpose smart contracts, which is terrible because there's all these wonderful creative experiments that are happening way faster than I can keep up with because of general purpose smart contracts, starting with Ethereum. But on the other hand, when you install Zec Wallet, you will see that there are not very many buttons, and they basically do what you expect. One is like you can hold up your QR code, and I will scan it and send you 1,000th of a Zcash. The other is you can click send and scan someone else's QR code. Like it's all pretty self-explanatory. I was going to say something else about the UX, but I forget. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a good way to get users to verify. For 3 years, I was working at a wallet company called Casa, and we would tell people to like manually verify shit on their Trezor and in the app, and we'd give them the opportunity to do that. And people who were going to do it would do it, and people who weren't wouldn't. So I think it's an unsolved problem.
Hello. So thank you so much for the talk. You are one of the legends in the space, and so it's wonderful to get to hear you.
Oh, thanks.
I wanted to hear, so 2 questions. Number 1, what is your opinion about Tornado Cash? Number 2, for someone who might have a lot of value on Ethereum and ETH or say stablecoins, what is the best way if we did want to access Zcash, some sort of atomic swap functionality or bridge functionality that maintains the privacy?
Great questions. Tornado Cash, I don't know a ton about. I know that the first version of it has now been, or is in the process of being upgraded to where it has more like Zcash-like functionality to where you can send and receive privately. Whereas the first version was more of a mixer concept where you like deposit and then later withdraw to yourself, and that's bad. So I'm glad they've upgraded from that. The second question is, if you have some ETH and you want to play with Zcash, how do you convert in a privacy-preserving way? Before I answer the question, let me say you don't have to do privacy-preserving at every hop. This is a thing that people sort of have an intuitive misunderstanding of. But if you play with it on your phone, you'll look on the Block Explorer to see what is not shown about you when you do things. You'll see that it is a totally valid process to register with Coinbase or Gemini and like upload your fucking driver's license and blah blah blah. Is this being recorded? And now Coinbase knows everything about you, right? Like whatever. And then buy Zcash on Coinbase for Ethereum. And then when you withdraw that Zcash out of Coinbase to your phone, suddenly it's yours again. Right? Like from that moment forward, it's like you withdrew cash out of an ATM and the bank has literally no knowledge or control or responsibility for what you do with it from that moment forward. So that works fine. But some Zcashers, not me, but a bunch of other Zcashers are currently working on integrating Thorchain. Maybe that will end up being the answer you prefer. Okay.
Yeah, hi. I'm a huge fan of Zcash and one of the biggest traders, I would say. And I'm not trading drugs on it. Legit transactions. But yeah, my question is about the goal of Zcash. So as I understand, the goal is to get transactions private and get the privacy up. But are there any future goals that you would like to reach in this space? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have unbounded future goals. We're going to do all the things eventually, especially if we continue to have like this exponential takeoff of users and technology and money and new ideas and whatever. The short-term, like 2 or 3 year goals for Zcash that my company's working on, I got to clarify real quick. My company is about 1/3 of the development teams supporting Zcash measured by budget. Although we do punch above our weight measured by output, but there's multiple other organizations that are doing really good stuff for Zcash, including the Thorchain thing. But my company's plans for the next 2 or 3 years are to make our own wallet, even though there are many good Zcash wallets like Zec Wallet Lite, ZEC wallet that you're installing right now. There are already many good Zcash wallets, but we've decided we want to have a feedback loop of the user experience and the core cryptography co-evolving together. So we want the cryptographers to be sitting down side by side with the wallet designers day after day. So that's one thing we're doing. The second thing is switching from proof of work to proof of stake, which about a tenth to a quarter of people seem to hate, but I'm betting very few people in this room hate that. And that's going to be a huge effort. Like, literally years and years ago, like, I'm one of the people who thought of the concept of proof of stake before I'd heard it from anyone else. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 people, maybe including Vitalik, who had the same experience I did. And for literally like 7 years or something now, I've been waiting to see if Ethereum can demonstrate that switching from proof of work to proof of stake works. Like, how does it work? How long does it take? How do the users respond? User experience impacts, etc. So at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, we at Zcash intend to do the same thing. And the third part is cross-chain interop. Like, my feeling is, and I could be wrong, but I have this sense that like the era of everyone congregating on the same L1 together, and that's where you get the most benefit, is going to shift, and then there will be the era of people who use different tools and technologies all interoperating with each other, and that's even a bigger network effect. But that requires some new scientific work, which Halo might help with, the zero-knowledge proof. And it also requires better user experience, like new wallets or better wallet metaphors or something.
Yeah, hi. So given Zcash paved the way for this innovation, I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on zero-knowledge rollups.
Well, I really like them in concept a lot. I'm really proud of the fact that all of the current generation of zero-knowledge rollups, like most of them have derived from the Halo scientific lineage that my team discovered. And then the other scientific lineage is Stark's, which we're also founding scientists of Zcash, by the way. So some people that I've worked with are the founders of all of the modern zero-knowledge proof systems scientifically. There's a lot I don't understand in engineering terms. I do have a really strong engineering intuition that optimistic rollups are just a terrible, like, temporary hack because zero-knowledge proofs weren't good enough. We didn't have the trustless, scalable, fast zero-knowledge proofs ready, 3 or so years ago when people started designing optimistic rollups. Is that okay to say that? Any other questions?
No, I think we're going to get Sandman in a second. But I just wanted to ask everyone to give Zooko another round of applause. And